Well, it's been a year since Russian tanks rolled across Ukrainian borders, triggering a war that killed thousands of civilians, forced millions to flee, and upended countless lives. Tensions are high, and extra security measures are in place in cities and towns throughout Ukraine as the country braces for potential Russian attacks. World leaders, meanwhile, are expressing their solidarity with Kyiv. The Polish Prime Minister met with his counterpart in the capital city to mark the occasion, and the Ukrainian president visited a hospital there and awarded medals to injured soldiers. Earlier, in an emotional address to his troops, Volodymyr Zelensky promised victory in 2023.
It is you who will decide whether we are all going to exist, whether Ukraine is going to exist. Every day, every hour, it is you, Ukrainian soldiers, which will decide it.
CNN's chief international anchor, Christian Amanpour, joins me live in Kyiv. Much nervousness, as I understand it, this morning as to what might unfold in Ukraine. But what's the mood like now, Christian?
Well, Max, if you can imagine exactly a year ago at this time, this capital was under attack, surroundings were under attack, tank columns were heading towards this capital from the north. Russia had landed paratroopers at an airport nearby this capital. The idea was to take this capital and decapitate the leadership. But as you can see, President Zelensky and his army are still standing, and he paid tribute to those very soldiers who have been maintaining the resistance, defending and creating counteroffensives over this past year, and also to the civilians who have, by and large, all turned into overnight soldiers, all resisting this invasion by Russia, which, yes, it is its first full-scale year, but it's been going on in the east since 2014. So this country has been suffering significant losses. 15,000 before this war started, this current one, and now who knows, tens of thousands of dead and wounded in support of this country. However, they remain by and large optimistic that with the support of their allies, who you just saw in vigils and moments of remembrance in Europe and other capitals, they remain optimistic here that with that continued support, their resistance will continue as well. Max?
We saw Western leaders speaking today, showing unity behind Ukraine, also suggesting that NATO can be stronger than it is right now. How do you rate the state of the Western alliance?
Well, again, and just to say that as yet today, there has been no full frontal Russian attack on these cities. So let's just keep our fingers crossed. It's a very different situation than it was exactly a year ago. But over the last months, you know, that the Russians have been using their missiles and their offensives against civilian targets, including infrastructure. All of that to say that the Ukrainians have been expending a huge amount of the weaponry they've been receiving and of the ammunition they've been receiving, and that needs to be stepped up according to all the NATO leaders. They need to get much more ammunition here for the weapon systems that have already been delivered. Very importantly and symbolically, when you mentioned and you showed the Polish Prime Minister coming here, he did come with the first of the Polish Leopard tanks. They're German tanks, but they've been released by Germany from third-party countries to send them here. And so symbolically, the first has arrived. But of course, the question now remains from President Zelensky, who says that last year our watchword was weapons. This year it is speed, speed, speed. We do not have time to waste. Every single moment we waste are more lives lost. He's framed this as a battle between David and Goliath, and David needs all the help it can get to have a knockout punch in his sling. And so that is what the message is for this second year of war.
CNN's Christian Amanpour live for us in Kyiv on this one-year anniversary. Thank you so much. The Ukrainian military calling the anniversary a day that has become symbolic for the whole world, and Kyiv is preparing for what could be another massive round of Russian strikes to mark the occasion, as we were saying. Meanwhile, a grinding war of attrition continues playing out along the eastern front lines, and Russian mercenaries are now claiming control of a village near the embattled city of Bakhmut, an area where some of the fiercest fighting has been taking place. CNN's Alex Marquardt joins me now, live in Dnipro in eastern Ukraine. What is the state of the front lines right now, Alex?
Max, as you say, it is grinding. The fight in the east and in the south is very active, but those front lines are relatively stagnant. They haven't changed much since November, when Ukrainians recaptured the city of Kherson that had been held by the Russians. The fiercest fighting recently has been in the past few weeks and months around that city of Bakhmut, where Ukrainian forces have been facing out against largely those mercenaries and convicts from the Wagner Group. There have been enormous losses on both sides, incremental gains by the Russian side, including today. They claim, we can't verify it, but they claim that they have taken a suburb of Bakhmut to the northwest of the city. We spent yesterday in Vuhledar to the south, where Russians have been trying to push forward. That would be a key launching off point for them to move deeper into Donbass. We know that the Russians are trying to mount an offensive. They have been pushing forward in several areas, including Vuhledar and Bakhmut, without much success. Of course, Max, the violence is not limited to those front lines. We have seen missile attacks, drone attacks all across the country, including here in the city of Dnipro over the past few weeks. So the fighting does continue very actively along those fronts. The attacks do continue in cities and towns all across the country from the air. And then, Max, in the coming weeks, we are expecting the Ukrainians to mount their own counteroffensive, to go on the attack, to try to claw back territory from the Russians relatively soon. Max?
In the face of growing international pressure over its relationship with Moscow, China is making new calls for a political settlement to the Ukraine conflict. Following a visit by Beijing's top diplomat to the Kremlin, China's foreign ministry has said it's willing to play a constructive role in helping resolve issues, but provided no details. European leaders are urging a sense of caution. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who we heard from earlier, said China's proposal needs to be looked at in the context of its relationship with Russia, while Germany says Beijing should talk to both Moscow and Kyiv. Nick Robertson has been trying to make sense of all of this. Interesting to hear what Fred was saying there about, where Russia goes from here in terms of resources. I mean, there is talk about China providing military resources to Russia. We heard the head of NATO saying that there's intelligence to suggest that might happen.
Yeah, and the United States has been saying the same thing. It was interesting that the Ukrainians said to China's 12-point proposition, which isn't a peace plan, but it's 12 aspirations, which was a positive response, which was, let's hear more about it. I think Ukraine is in the business of not turning down opportunities for peace, but they have to be on Ukraine's terms. And there's nothing about that in the language that the Chinese have used so far. And it's interesting what the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, had to say today about the Chinese proposal, which was, this is okay, we see this, but it doesn't really have much on it. He said, look, China appears to be sort of putting a public face of neutrality, but actually they're not neutral in this. They're giving non-lethal assistance to Russia. They're an important outlet for Russian goods, specifically energy products, and they're the biggest country that's behind Russia at the moment. And there's the possibility that they may provide that lethal aid. So I think what we're seeing around the China 12 points is a healthy dose of skepticism, but saying, okay, if you've got something, let's move forward with it. But it's got to be achieving what both countries want. And there's nothing in there about Russia's illegal invasion.
Well, that's the word, that there's no language around an invasion, which has offended many people in the West.
It has. I mean, it's very clear. China's position here is a pro-Russian position. It's being talked about in diplomatic terms today, but that's very clear. And it was very clear when Wang Yi, the chief foreign policy advisor to President Xi, spoke at the weekend. He said, genuine security issues must be addressed. He was speaking about Russia's security issues. This is what Secretary of State Antony Blinken says, that China rather is buying President Putin's narrative about the reason for the war, hook, line and sinker. He's not challenging it. And of course, everyone else is, because they see it for what it is, not an accurate reflection of what's happened.
Okay, thank you, Nick.